Okay, we are here in the new studio, and Alberto, it's the first time you are here.
Yeah.
And it's actually
It's been a while.
It's been a while also since we saw each other for the last time. I mean, you're here to record Chopin, and I'm still wearing my headphones, which is actually not, it's a nice sound, but it's not necessary.
You don't hear me.
So since you were here to record Chopin, and since also we didn't see each other for a while, I thought it is nice to ask you some pretty difficult questions.
Let's see what I can do.
I'm a little bit joking, and not completely, because last week I released this video on the Chopin competition with Garrick Ohlsson. You obviously saw that video.
Yeah.
And we are going with that actually in a kind of territory where, rightfully so, people like have question marks. If they don't know us or our work, they might think like, what are these guys, or what is this guy?
Who are these two?
Yeah. And so before we go into your Chopin work and what your plans are for recording next week, and also what you've already been recording since now, because we didn't share a lot of information on those projects.
Yeah.
People think we are not making recording, but we are actually recording like crazy.
Full speed.
Especially you. But let's talk about it in a few minutes. I would like to just hear your general thoughts about that video with Garrick Ohlsson, where he basically says Chopin would not recognize his music in this Chopin competition for several reasons. So what do you think about? What do you make out of that?
What he says, it's actually what I've heard all my life in the mainstream world. That and what I constantly hear from my teachers, what I heard in the past, which is simply, logically, there are 2 centuries that separate us from Chopin. So if we will go back on time, we shouldn't be surprised if we hear something very different.
Is that something that people in your teachers were talking about, I would say, really? Was that topic on the table? Are we playing Chopin still like he would have wanted us to play? Or is it just what you make out of it? Is it an attitude or a general idea?
It's just a simple statement that comes from the most logical idea that we are far from that period, and of course we don't have recordings of Chopin, and what we can do is just base ourselves on a little bit the writings of his students, and especially the what we have written on the score.
Okay. So, but my question actually was more like, were there conversations during your time as a student, and you started basically at the age of 4 or 5 or 6 to play piano?
Very young, yeah.
You are now 20 years staged. I think even this year, officially 20.
It's 20 years that I started playing the piano, and 20 years of piano lessons. Yeah. That says something about your the way you can, anyways, doesn't matter. But during those 20 years, was this conversation really actively on the table? Did you ask these questions to your teacher, or is there an underlying agreement like we actually don't care too much? Or is that too strong, that they don't care too much? In the past, I was used to ask these kind of questions, but of course, once we started working together, and meanwhile I'm still doing my lessons, I don't ask those things because it became a sort of underlying agreement, and something that it's a mentality that I expect from the world, in fact. And so when I saw the video of Garrick Ohlsson, I wasn't surprised at all. It's what everyone silently agreed upon. And so...
Which is weird, because when you would ask directly the question, hey, you actually just said that what we hear today in the Chopin competition, it doesn't matter. I think we got the question like, there's also Chopin competition on periodical instruments. they basically play in a similar way.
It doesn't change a lot in terms
but
of
when you go
interpretation.
to musicians and the jury or the organization, you say, hey, actually we have some criteria, and it shows it's pretty easy to show that what Chopin had in mind, it's not what we hear here, and you even not promote that. When we would go with these concrete questions, I can imagine that those people will freak out.
In a way, the Chopin's competition is called Chopin's competition because there's only music of Chopin that gets displayed. But when in my experience, also in competitions, what the jury members especially look for in their words, it's always the personality of the musician, and so it is always the musician that is in the center of everything, and not the music of the composer that gets played in the particular competition. So, but it reflects perfectly in my opinion, the mainstream world, the main world, that it's about the musician and not about the music. Of course, there's also the dark side of that, which is it's never really described that the musicians, in order to be there, they must agree upon a interpretation that doesn't necessarily line up with their own idea of Chopin, and so it's a little bit. There are two ideas conflicting with each other. On one hand, you are in their competitions, showing your personality, who you are as a musician. On the other hand, if you do something that is too far from the tradition, you might have problems, or you might not just get into the competition, because there are preliminary rounds that select pianists in that way. And so the question is, who are those who arrive to those final rounds, and who are those who are left behind, and why they are left behind? The truth is that there's not really such a thing as, okay, let's check if they take all Chopin's indication, or if their intention is to... They all say our intention is to go after Chopin's intention or the composer's intention, but
that's the general idea.
That's the general idea,
but you say underlying there is this knowledge or this notion that actually people who are in the mainstream, and let's say also in the hip world, because again the performances are not that differently, that there is this underlying notion, we actually know that we are far from Chopin. It's not only Garrick Ohlsson who believes that.
But yet...
but it works only as long as you don't ask the concrete questions.
There is an underlying need to justify the authority of the people who work in this field. And so how can you, in a way, especially if you're a teacher, how can you push a student to follow a certain interpretation just by saying that it's your opinion? The student can say, yeah, but this is my opinion, and we both are not Chopin, so on that stand, my opinion is equal to yours.
Okay.
And so to give a little bit of authority and to push a little bit, sometimes jury members or teachers or whoever wants to justify his opinion or interpretation has to call upon what he believes or she believes to be the composer's intention. So we all end up there.
So basically, when you have, I had lessons in Amsterdam too, piano lessons, and I have to say, back then I was still, I became, my position was more and more difficult, because at the end of my piano studies, I started to be aware of this problem.
Yeah.
And so my first teacher who studied in Poland, and I've shared it a lot. When you study in Poland, you are by definition a Chopin specialist. I don't know why. I have no idea, but that's untouchable. But when you ask them questions, it became the tension became really, really, really high. And you remember this to this day, that when I did my examination on, you have also these teaching activities as a student. You have to become basically also a piano teacher. Mm-hmm. So during that examination, I moved to another teacher, thanks to my organ teacher, because I remember one day
This guy was really making my life into a hell, because I
Yeah.
asked questions about tempo, and he starts like this, like, ridiculous, I'm going to prove you that you're wrong. And then during the lessons I say, yeah, but here and here and here and here, this makes no sense. And there really the problem started. And so I changed from him to Willem Brons, which was much more open. But of course he said also, like, don't do, I mean, we have
Don't
to
overdo that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could live with that, but during that examination where I had to get my degree as a teacher, so to say, he really made my life hard, and also in the preparation. I remember Jacques van Noordmes, I came back from a group lesson with him. I was in what we would say now in my master's already there, and he saw my teacher, my previous teacher, and he said, I need to talk to you right now. And he said to me, please, when you go to what we call the canteen, to drink something. I had never had any problems. But during my examination, he started to ask the tough questions.
Yeah.
And what happened, I was so well prepared that I had answers, and I flipped his questions into reverse questions. Yeah. And actually what happened was, like, the members of the jury board starting to laugh. So that was how I ended my career as a pianist. But I guess that during your lessons, I mean, you had piano lessons, let's be honest. For me, piano was like a prime instrument, first instrument, but my heart and soul was at the organ. And it's only like 5-6 years after conservatory I really pushed the piano. But these type of questions that got me into trouble were never in the classroom when you were a student, or still today.
Well, when I was in Los Angeles, let's say that I was very aware of being with a teacher who didn't really like these kind of questions. And on the other hand, I was very aware that he was very often, especially on tempi, justifying.
How did you discover that he was not really fine with these questions? Did you ask him?
Well, in a way, he started that, because rightfully so. He said, when you choose your tempo, you have to choose a tempo that, especially if you don't have any change of tempo. Logically, to have a structure in the piece, you have to choose a tempo that allows you to play everything at one tempo.
That's actually correct.
But then, in reality, I took that seriously. And of course, I came to the result that many pieces.
What piece was that? Do you still remember that?
A Schubert sonata, but even like with a Prokofiev piano concerto, the idea applies to everything, because, as he was saying, it's written on the score. It's not me saying that. Okay, then I took that seriously, even on Beethoven sonatas. But then, of course, he said, but this beginning is too slow, and it's in 4, in 2, and the fact that it's in 2 means this. And I was like, this is based on nothing. But I was also aware that if I would have pushed a little bit, I would have gotten in trouble.
Because you really realized there was no real answer, or just a very thin wall
that
you were not supposed to
and because I realized that also, meanwhile, just working myself, I understood that relationship between the speed of a piece, and the Italian tempo word, it wasn't really a matter of notes per second. It was a matter of notation, which is something that nobody has ever explained to me. Yeah. So it's, in fact, an adagio, if he has a certain notation, can sound faster than a presto if it has another type of notation. And so these are things that nobody ever explained to me. And of course, a few months later, I jumped into your channel, and everything made sense. And at that point, I actually didn't need to ask questions anymore.
Okay.
And the same is my situation now. I don't actually need to ask questions. I know that it's a mentality that belongs to their world, and I'm not interested in challenging that right now as a student.
I understand. The thing is that I'm just asking that because seeing Garrick Ohlsson, they seem to be proud with the statement, like, we have an evolved technique, like, as if, and I'm not disrespectful in any stretch of imagination, so don't think that, and maybe I'm phrasing it a little bit awkward in another language that is my mother language. But when you hear people like him, I mean, they are great pianists saying that, it feels to me that they are actually saying, as if they were talking to the teacher Chopin, like, see how much we practiced and how much better we became, and you would be proud.
There's a sort of ideal of romantic hero who fights to reach the level that it's the level of the gods, but he fails anyways, but the trial is worth.
I understand that. And I mean, when I was in conservatory the first years in piano class, I studied 5-6 hours a day just because Liszt was there. I mentioned that. You had the idea, I had the idea. Yeah, whatever we do, we will never reach the level of those people. But many people today still have that idea.
My explanation, I mean, I arrive with that, and it's just an opinion, but it's the fact that we musicians, we want to feel like there is something special about us in comparison to other people who are not doing what we are doing. And so we want to, I don't know, to raise in ourselves the idea that we are capable of things that others are not, which is partially true, but we are not here for that. I mean, or we can be here for ourselves and we can say, yeah, listen, I'm going to give you my interpretation of this because I want to astonish the... But then you have to be honest with your audience. You need to understand your responsibility, and especially you have to be honest with your students because they come to you not to learn your interpretation. They come to you to learn how to play Beethoven, Chopin, and so there must be honesty first of all, and then you let the other choose because you cannot go to a concert and play like Lang Lang and say that that's the Beethoven's way. And because people rely upon your authority and they end up believing in you.
That's my main, also with the video that's coming up with the conductor Pavel Järvi.
Yeah.
They give explanations of something that if they're super intelligent people, I mean, come on, if Garrick Ohlsson as well, but also the conductor Järvi, you don't reach that level and position in this world, and you don't conduct orchestras if you're not super intellectually gifted.
But the problem is that nobody wants to say, hey, people, I'm bringing you an updated version of Beethoven. Nobody wants to say that.
Yeah, but you could say that, but then be honest about the things that in that interview, what he should have said, like, I don't know. Probably these metronome marks didn't work or whatever, because he shows in his performance that he doesn't reach the tempi that he claims that are simply because of taste too fast. No, it's technically they cannot reach them. And so you're sitting there as a conductor of that level. You're preparing probably for the interview. You know the question is going to be launched. And then his answer is so brilliant. Beethoven probably gave this metronome marks to indicate an area of tempo.
Yeah.
Because if you would ask him like, yeah, but you do not match the metronome mark. Yeah, but it's an area. I mean, come on. Why would you give an area? And if you would have an area, let's say, granted, 5% more or less, would be still okay. Certainly the room size. And why wouldn't you give the middle tempo then? And so start from there. So I'm wondering why. I mean, I get that they are in a position there, they don't have the answers and probably ever realize the alternative solution. But the thing is, when you do realize that, and what you say, they have an authoritative position. So they are influencing more people than they can imagine. And in a way, even that when you and I come with a solution that we can practically demonstrate, that people turn to us because we go in what they see as a violation of the authoritative voice of people that they follow. And there I have a fundamental problem with.
Yeah, it's I don't understand that, because in the science world there wouldn't be any problem when you correct another scientist. The other scientists wouldn't have any problem if you correct his work. It's just they all are there to search the truth and to update. And then
the strange thing is, maybe that's a modern thing, like you have more and more interviews and musicians that being asked questions to metronome marks, which is great. Let's keep doing that. But then, and going back to the Chopin competition, so you have these people, great musicians in their style, mainstream, that actually give explanations that either do not make any sense, or like Garrick Ohlsson flat out said, like, listen, we have an evolved piano technique. What do you think that Chopin would
But on the one hand, they want to have the answers. On the other hand, they know that it's like, there is something wrong.
Yeah.
But they do not merge those two and say like, maybe we can play like this. Let's get rid of the idea that we follow the composer's intention, which, by the way, is already documented in 1840 that nobody did it. I mean, it's not something to be shameful.
Yeah.
And then my question would be, but I don't know what your response or your thoughts would be on this. What I then see is this image, Chopin participating on his own competition, and the guy would not even get through the preliminary rounds.
Probably not.
Because he would play very differently.
Yeah, and
I mean, he's a 90-pound weakling. I found that rather disturbing, this way of describing Chopin. He wouldn't like that idea, but he was that, huh?
Yeah.
So there he would be in front of this grand player of Steinway. On the Steinway probably barely be
The
able to
truth
press
is
notes.
also that the other way around, like when you go to study this music with a teacher, they tell you, no, he was a great virtuoso and innovated a lot of the technique of the time, which is actually true. I mean, if you compare a Mozart sonata with what Chopin writes, of course it's more advanced technique.
Yeah, but then compare Chopin etude with the Liszt etude.
And then with the Rachmaninoff, and then with Prokofiev, and it's always the problem that when you approach history, you cannot put all these words without knowing using these words without knowing the context. Yes, he was a virtuoso at his time, but what was the average level at the time?
Yeah, and I'm not so sure Chopin was seen as a virtuoso pianist. There's this famous quote by, who was it? Hiller, or I don't know, someone who knew, I think the poet, I forget the name, who was on friendly foot with Chopin. And he said the two great names in the 40s were Thalberg and Liszt.
Of course.
And he once apparently said, like, the answer on the question who is the greatest pianist, Liszt or Thalberg, is simply Chopin. But then he described Chopin's playing. When he was playing even on a playable piano, you had to put your ear on the strings to hear him play.
Yeah.
And then you heard the most incredibly sound. But it's not like the lion that Liszt was.
Or certainly not the lions that we see in the Chopin's competition today.
No.
Yeah.
And that's something of another point. I mean, we can talk about it later. We have some beautiful quotes by by Hoffmann, but also by Rosenthal, who was a student of Liszt, saying that if Liszt would come back, and he writes this in the 1920s in an article, he would be proud of the speed that we played today, his works, and meaning much faster. And even so, he says, black and white, he was a great pianist, but technically he would not be able to do what we are doing today. And that's 1924, saying also that the students of Liszt back then, when they would be, have an ambition to enter conservatories, they would have to practice 4 times as much.
Yeah.
That's just 40 or 50 years of time.
And yet, when this world needs to justify those metro numbers, say, like
It's unbelievable.
without practicing their match, or like, people often don't see that there is something really, really off with this.
So returning to Chopin, your project, like you already recorded all the etudes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think many people know that. By the way, if you hear them like in your version in whole beat, it's like an updated Clementi. Suddenly you hear Clementi, which was for Chopin, so many others, like the source of.
There's also, I hear a lot of, you played a little bit at the Moschles etudes there. I totally see a link, Kramer as well. So
very classical, actually, but with an harmonic
things that he was actually giving to his students.
Yeah.
So, so there you start seeing a line in history, like how these people were people of their time.
But
actually.
Also, we are already again in another subchapter, but if you look at the notation, if you just have the score in front of your Chopin etude, it's so similar to a Clementi etude. It's not so much different.
Yeah, it's a little bit more.
Than the later Liszt etudes, like etude, these transformational etudes. There is nothing. And yet people in the comment section, also on the Chopin video, they say, but Chopin and Liszt were on equal terms.
No, because you can see their music is so. That's why Liszt was.
But it's not even the point of what we say. We say they left metronome numbers. In one way we cannot read them. In the other ways we can. What's your other solution? We actually don't need it to try to reconstruct with fantasy a context. We have effect.
That's true.
And we just have to.
Though the
apply
context
that.
is sometimes really
the context is
interesting,
of course, and it's important, but it's not that you do the other way around. First, you find a solution, and then you try to understand the context around that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, speaking about Chopin, it feels like if you say that, like, listen, Chopin was a great pianist, but he wouldn't be able to participate in modern Chopin competition at all. He wouldn't be able to do that. Then it feels to many people like you are like downplaying this great man. But no, the music he left is like from such an unbelievable level. It's zillion times more important than the number of notes he could play per second. But yet, that's important to also take in the bank, you know?
At the same time, if you decided to implement those metronomes in single beat and they say, why are you playing so fast? Yeah, I'm following the metronomes. But you don't hear that you are killing this music.
Yeah.
So in the moment that you decide to play a faster pointing, and they say no, but there's also the music that you have to make.
Yeah.
Because so it's all basically it has all one goal. This is the interpretation. Whether you are here, I will bring you here with an excuse. If you're here, I will bring you here with another excuse.
Yeah.
So it's basically saying that follow the mainstream and you won't have any problems.
Yeah, this is huge gap between like Garrick Ohlsson's remark as well. We have an evolved piano technique. Yeah, from where?
Yeah.
And yet we cannot reach those metronome marks that were given by the same guy. You say we are so much better than you. Probably it is right there, but we should close the gap. But coming back to your Chopin project, so we recorded the etudes and the preludes.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, the entire set of ballades and scherzi are on the program, which many people will say, what?
Yeah.
What? When did you practice this?
Never. It's the secret of whole beat. You don't have to practice. Kidding.
Well, in a sense.
Otherwise, people take me seriously as well. So it's a joke.
But there's partially a truth in that. I mean, you are a guy who was from very young age focused on piano playing, very high level, actually prepared for an international career. Let's be honest. I mean, your Prokofiev shit is on YouTube if I want to hear it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's there.
It's like scary to watch, but you are the living proof actually that when you advance so much technically and then you go back in time, guess what?
It's very hard.
But technically, you can do the 4 ballades and 4 scherzi in 1 week.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it would be
for
like
notes,
a huge project because
in
I'm
terms
coming
of
from
notes,
the 18th
yes,
century.
yeah.
For me, it's like pretty advanced as Chopin.
Yeah.
My channel was always named From Bach to Beethoven and a little bit
And beyond.
But the technique changes there so much that you have to really sacrifice your 18th century. You cannot do everything.
No, it's not
But
possible.
in your case, it's interesting. Of course, you need to practice and you need to make it work. And it's like you are naked in this.
Certainly,
work,
if you decide to apply also the pedalings and the fingerings, there are things that you really need to work on.
Tell us a little bit about your approach. So you practice in Brussels now basically on modern pianos.
Mm-hmm.
You come to my place and then we use the Fritz Viennese pianoforte. So we can talk a little bit about the pianoforte and why you use not a player. But what's your experience practicing? What's your approach? How do you practice? What are your criteria, so to say?
The first step is implementing the tempo. So once you learn the notes, and of course I should say that when I learn in a slow process, or practice slow, I immediately implement also the pedalings and the fingerings because it's not something that you can do later. But
the fingerings from which edition?
Fingerings usually it's whether Mikuli or if I find from the first print, first edition.
So you're using Mikuli as well, which sometimes slightly alters the.
Yeah, also the pedalings, but also the pedalings usually always take from the first edition. unless there's something that usually so far I didn't encounter something that was problematic. So everything that I did was from the first edition, and I'm still doing that. And fingerings as well. I should say that perhaps sometimes Mikuli gives a little bit more fingerings.
Different in nature than Chopin's, or
not really. And he also makes the remarks that the fingerings he gives are totally in line with the Chopin's tradition.
And now they're easy to understand, because we had some questions also on the Chopin video, and rightfully so. Fingering, I've explained also in my follow-up video on that. Fingering is a very difficult topic because there is not some one truth. But
if you are in the right perspective, no. Which means that today we are used to think about fingerings in terms of something that sure allows you to play comfortably in order to not to play wrong notes.
Yeah.
But when you see those fingerings, and often today are rejected because they say, yeah, how can you play these fingerings at this speed? So also those are a huge tempo indicator. Without pedal. And those are a huge tempo indicator, in fact. If you want to implement those, which are meant to be implemented, guess what? You have to slow down but there are also other aspects that those fingerings have a consequence on, which is certainly the timings, the expression, and the legato, especially the legato. There is a beautiful fingering from Chopin in his fourth ballade, where he writes that he wants a melody in legato, and it's always 1 1 1 1 1, and without pedal. And so at that point, you start understanding what was the legato at that time. Certainly, if you implement all those things, it cannot be the same legato that we have in mind today. And so that's why those fingerings become important, because they are a mean of expression. And if you have to challenge certain preconcepts that we have today on how they play legato, what sound they had, you have to first follow those indications.
It's really interesting what you say, because what we said also is like they are an expressive tool of the composer. We don't see that today like that.
No.
I don't know if you know the quote, if I shared that with you, from Clara Schumann's diary. I don't know, it's a letter or it's just a reflection she makes, because Brahms was pushing her to the negative with Robert's works. I mean, don't do too much because people don't pay attention. Brahms is always taking as a metronome hater. He was not. He was just saying, don't do the
because
effort.
People don't care.
They don't care. Don't even try. But she answered, or it was to her publisher, it's possible as well, where the question was asked like, shall we ask someone to make the fingerings and the score? And she said, no. I'm going to do that myself, because the fingerings have a huge implication on the interpretation.
Yeah.
Tell that today. Everybody thinks that fingering is something personal. Who is taking care of fingerings in the piano class?
Yeah.
I'm spoiled with that. My teacher, Jacques Nootmes, was like, you have a system for swelling, for Buxtehude, for Bach, for Mendelssohn. I was like maybe a little bit too rigid, but he had the principle in mind there.
But at the end, all these indications, pedalings, tempo, fingerings, at the end, they change a lot in the articulation, all stuff, but at the end, the thing that really changes is the message of the music, and the expression, and
you feel it's really essential. Also, the pedal indications.
I will say so,
because when I remember when I practiced Chopin back in the days, long before you were born, I would say, but I always struggled. Like, okay, but I would die to have a little pedal here, and yet you played all the etudes. But it's sometimes really hard, huh?
It is hard, but at that point you understand when those people were saying, yeah, this music is hard. Yeah, but you first have to reconstruct everything, and then you understand it's not hard in the sense of speed. There are many other factors that perhaps are much more difficult, because now if I have to go back, and play much faster. In a way, it's much easier.
Yeah,
You
because
put down
all the
the
little
pedal.
slurs and all the little notations, it
You're
all
not
goes
you're not
away.
exposed anymore. You are completely covered under a layer of pedal, but like this, you are naked.
Yeah, one release of the key that's
Then
wrong,
it goes
and
wrong, and
it's
over. It's really over, and people don't understand that you can literally bring the best pianist, the most virtuoso player, on his knees by just asking him to play a this tempi, implementing fingerings and pedalings. They wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I know that because it was the same for me. It took me years, and I'm still in the process. But you need to. It's whether you accept that or not. But there's no way in between. That's the problem. It's not a problem.
Well, it's a big challenge, and it's a problem because I guess when I hear it on the Viennese piano, we are recording it right now. But by the way, we're just doing that because that piano is so beautiful. Chopin knew these types of piano, and you could say like he composed it for certain the ballades for a later type, like the Paris pianos already. But these pianos were around, and
he was coming from that tradition anyways. So
the transparency you have in that piano with this music is just stunning. And they played a lot of Chopin in Vienna. I remember another thing, like was it also Clara or someone else who was saying like, poor Robert, he was in Vienna or something, and he went to shops where they sold scores, and it was only Chopin.
Yeah, but you get addicted to this music. Even for me,
popular, So in Vienna as well. But anyways, the tone quality becomes different when you use a little less pedal.
Yeah, and but also when the pedal comes in, it's an effect that it's stunning.
Yeah.
But at that point, you understand why they were, especially Chopin. I'm not saying that all composers were always, for example, in Schumann's scores, it's not always clear. I would say most of the time it's not. But with Chopin's, you don't.
There's no problem.
He's absolutely clear about what he wants, and so. Sometimes even I have moments. Oh, really? He doesn't do that, but. The moment that you accept that you don't question it, you just do it. It's just your job. Your life just becomes much, much easier.
It's weird because when we would say this in a panel discussion, people would say, yeah, that's dogmatic. Like life has its realities and its truth as well. So when you stick to a score you have to adapt because otherwise you look just like a machine that's not thinking. You have to reflect.
What I hear a lot is also, but on modern instruments, and it's not true. I practice like that and I play like that. I will play a concert with those pedalings, with those fingerings, with those tempi on a modern piano.
Yeah?
Yeah.
In a big hall?
Why not? Why not?
Because I could imagine the touch is a little bit heavier. It's much less than people think, but it's heavier. It's like deeper. You have never the desire to touch the pedal a little bit more.
Once you get used, you don't need to.
It's interesting what you say. I'm just writing the book and I have so many quotes. And Hoffman writes that at the end of the century. Once you're used to not, he was from the old school, perhaps, like don't use too much pedal. The Hummel, I would say Chopin, that's cool. Not a Thalberg and the later school. But once you're used to play without much pedal, you want to get rid of it at all because the tone quality is so much more beautiful.
Yeah, but also
that's much later.
You have a feeling I speak for myself, obviously, but I have a feeling of being safe. I don't have to think of it's there.
Just by following the score.
Just there. What I simply have to do is to make sure that all indications are followed in a convincing way. But for the rest, the music just takes off. It does the job itself. It's so well written.
Yeah, and maybe you're evaluating your own input because at the end people will say, yeah, but your personality then, where do I hear Alberto Sanna in these recordings?
I don't know.
When you hear I play is like
but the difference comes out anyways. You don't have to worry about that. We're all different, and nobody will be, even if a million pianists will follow exactly the same indications, they will sound different, all of them.
Even when they would stick to the same tempo.
Yeah.
It would still be different.
And by the way, I don't see today this difference between pianists in competitions. I remember the last Tchaikovsky competition, I had 10 appassionatas. If somebody would have blindfolded me, I wouldn't have recognized the pianist.
Yeah.
And maybe
that's actually true. I mean, that's
and where's the personality there? By following?
No, it's expected that you don't show personality; that you just fall into the steps.
Yeah, because guess what? Those who arrive at the end of a competitions are those who are capable of not creating conflicts in the jury. Yeah. And so, if we choose the
that's a political statement, by the way. Imagine that.
Well, I've been in competitions, so I
basically say the prize winner is the guy or the girl that actually managed to have the how do you say that, the common ground for.
Yeah, but also, like, I personally, I don't understand what's more what there is in the world more interesting that trying to just get a little closer to the voice of these composers. I mean, as much as interesting could be my interpretation, I don't know. But like, if Chopin will come back to life and give a concert, like, people would not hesitate to go to his concert rather than mine. And so why not trying to get there? And we will never get there anyways. But just to try to have a little bit of a shadow of that, because that's what we are talking of. It's not.
It's going to be very interesting also when I'm able to change the setup, like not like here, but at the piano, to see you talk about certain aspects and details.
The final aspect, since we are everything is about tempo, is actually destroying this idea of the Chopin's rubato that you do whatever you want anytime. If you just apply.
The rubato is written in the score in time.
It's written, and when you have, I'm talking especially about the last prelude, the D minor with those scales and the left, and the effect is unbelievable. And
because you arrived like so well on time, like
and guess what? You don't need to take time. And today in that prelude, I will probably make a video on that, because people need to see the pianist there. It's whether they start the scales earlier to arrive on time and not take time with the left hand, or they take time with the left hand. So already there is something fundamentally wrong with the way everyone knows that the rubato of Chopin is left hand stable, and but who actually
does that?
Does that?
Yeah, it's used as an explanation for these two fast metronome marks that you slow down there, but it's.
But no, but and then you see the Vidor quote, or all the quotes that talk about Chopin's being very strict with time, and then you apply to his music, and it just comes by itself. And it's
like the Beethoven symphonies.
Yeah, once I showed my recording to a friend of mine, and he asked me, but why do you play so strictly on time? And where is it written to do the rubato? Where is it? Not saying that you cannot do it, but he also
subtle, like unnoticeable.
Yeah. And guess what? When he wants that, he writes that.
He's right with the Nitto and Rallentando. Why would he expect you to do that stuff?
And I know that most of the time people say, but how do you know that he actually played? Like we cannot know. So what we do is just we take what's on paper. That's all.
That's a true remark. You say, okay, we never heard the guy play, but we're not going to position ourselves opposite to what he left in the score, right?
Yeah, I mean...
you take that first, and from there...
I mean, unless somebody comes with a recording of Chopin, it's not that we have many alternatives.
Even then, did the guy feel well? I mean, that's the same thing as duration. What would it say? What would it say? I mean, what do these concert durations say?
And what he left on the score, it means... anyways, that in that particular moment, he had that in mind.
Tempo in mind.
So you can be sure that even if he didn't play that in other context, in that moment... that he had in mind. So he believed that was possible.
By the way, I sometimes wonder when I hear you play those etudes, A minor, for instance, if it could be possible, but this is a political statement that some people will hate me for, but I think it's not far from the truth that his tempi were ideal tempi that not necessarily he could meet. Like, if he was so weak as he is described, some of his etudes in whole beat are not for everyone.
They're not. They're
It's
not.
not so easy, and
They're
certainly
not.
when you leave the pedal and things, but that's the secondary of nature. But that's just a question we will never know. We will never know, and those things are fascinating. So, just to people are going to see you are in time. I mean, whenever we are ready for that, and you're ready, sitting at the Fritz and just demonstrating some cool elements. Also technically, because the questions come more and more and more, and we'll do that at the clavichord. Like, okay, we accept this whole beat reconstruction or tempo reconstruction in the 18th century. What's the implication musically? What's the implication technically? And there is a lot to say about it.
It's a never-ending conversation.
So
really.
we're going to do that. I mean, it's just good for an update if you're still listening after. I have no idea. I should have other glasses, like 45 minutes. I mean, it's there is a lot that we can share, but it's good that people and that we can share with you guys. But it's good that you know that Alberto is going to record if the tuning of the Fritz holds.
Allows.
We're going on holiday a week, and the guy is on his own. But you're doing a great job in tuning. We have the ears for it, and the combination it's not only hearing the intervals or hearing the vibrations, it's also the motorical conversion into the slightest movement you need to bring the string into, but that piano has an own soul, and it likes to play with us. Like, it's unbelievable.
The only thing that I would like to add is that recently a lot of my colleagues have been discovering the work that we are doing, and they are willing to, give it a shot in conservatory.
That's
So that might be a shock for many people, I know, but
you never know. I mean, maybe the world is waiting also. You have some leading voices, I get it. I mean, also in the musicology, the people who are really like outspoken for one option and outspoken against another solution to protect their own bubble, I get it. Those people are in a difficult position.
I mean, there's place for everyone, eh?
But you have a lot of people like in the mainstream. So I wouldn't say necessarily in the historically informed performance practice. I think the revolution, if there is ever a revolution, will come from the mainstream, like the pianists. Just the Steinway people, I would say, like, and then with all respect, if you play on the Steinway, I think it's a beautiful, but I mean, to make the difference clear, because they might never have thought about it. Like we started that conversation. Maybe it's just, and some people say, holy shit, it's not possible. The singers will suffocate and die. And other people will say, like, I've actually struggled with this. Let's give it a try.
Well, the other thing is that I can say that I've been working with the singers for the symphony, and at the moment nobody had
pretty easy for them.
Not even a drop of sweat. So
you told me like they can read the newspaper while singing
basically.
While it is but that's for another conversation.
Yeah.
While they say it's the voice-killing symphony because of the tempi. Let's do another
Let's wrap it up
podcast here with the Ninth Symphony, because that project, guys, we have to inform you, it's a huge project.
Yeah.
For us as pianists, because it's a huge score, 92 pages.
We have to play for 2 hours almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also bringing singers together and practice with them, bringing them home, like at the
preparing them to this tempi, because also that it's they have to
for the tempi, but also for the sound of my Paul Fritz piano, because they will just blow it away. And
one of them in mezzo forte, by the way.
Yeah. So chamber music there, we have a lot of challenges to do there, but they're all exciting things. And both of us, you and I, we have. The exciting thing is you know that what we are doing is like, on the edge of being of the birth of something new.
Yeah.
And the idea, we'll never know. Going back in time, we cannot explain those moments where you have these moments like this comes together in a way that it's impossible that this is not close to the truth. But of course you cannot share that because it happens in an abstract way that you see, holy shit. And then this beauty comes. Yeah. And suddenly you start to feel like, of course, in the Chopin competition, you still hear the beautiful Chopin music, but when you play it like a different way, and then, or Beethoven, then suddenly you see that you almost start to make gods of them.
It's overwhelming just for the fact that you hear everything. It's too much. It's
too much, yeah.
Yeah, it's too much.
And the brain is like in full mode of activity, give it and there's never tiresome or fatiguing.
Yeah.
So Beethoven 9, we are going to inform you. Maybe it's nice here, huh? You don't like this format?
A lot. Very comfortable, actually. Also, I can see myself. So
on the screen. And now I'm going to press the stop recording button. There is only one risk that the computer says, I'm out of space.
Let's see.
Okay, guys.
Thanks for listening, watching. Leave your questions in the comment boxes if you want us to talk about some other very non-provocative topics.
Of course.
It's true, it's not provocative. It's just saying that it's our
Honestly,
way of looking at the
if
facts.
anybody of an opposite opinion will be to join us at the table, we wouldn't have any problem in talking and to answer to questions and ask questions.
Yeah,
actually.
so give us a sign and we will bring you on here
We are
in the
here.
studio. We will just want to talk. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you don't miss anything. And as always, if you want to push us beyond any barriers, writing that in Sunny Date book. But for you, recording almost everything written by Chopin, go to our Patreon page because we need your support.
Yeah. See you soon, guys.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.